The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting live from the UK and across the world online, you're now listening to the UK's only live alternative late night talk show, and I'm Kevin Moore. For the next 3 hours, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On tonight's show, I'll be speaking to two guests who have met the source of infinitive being, or more commonly known to us as God. My first guest is Patricia Walker, whose accidental journey to enlightenment and the supernatural began when she met Sammy Hagar, former Van Halen frontman, at a rock concert in Mexico. On the second half of the show, I'll be joined by former atheist Sondra Sneed, who has had a conversation and interview with the source of infinitive being too. The phone lines will be open on the second and third part of each interview for you to interact with our guests. We are live every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday from 1 AM to 4 AM British Summer Time, and that's Monday, Wednesday and Friday, 8 PM to 11 PM Eastern Daylight Time in America. Patricia Walker now joins me via Skype from America. Patricia's spiritual journey started in the less expected place, a rock concert in Mexico, where she met Sammy Hagar, the former Van Halen frontman. She was then told by a psychic that she and Sammy Hagar had shared a past life, thus deepening the already interesting connection they had made. Let's hear the full story. Good evening, Patricia.
Hello, Kevin. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, wonderful to have you here. And what part of America are you based at?
I'm in Colorado, northern Colorado.
Oh, wonderful. Well, let's get straight into it now. You wasn't always a spiritual person. I mean, I think your background was Catholic.
Right. I was raised Catholic. I was always a spiritual person, but in a whole different way. I think following in the footsteps of my parents and my ancestors to the Catholic faith. But that didn't satisfy me. As I got a little bit older, I couldn't understand some of the teachings. Didn't make sense to me, like why are people who are living in New Guinea damned to hell for all eternity because they had never heard of Jesus. And my dad had some wonderful friends, some people that he worked with, and I couldn't figure out why, because they didn't believe in God, that they were going to hell. And that broke my heart because they were such great people. And things like that just didn't make sense to me. So
Yeah. I mean, you founded a very judgmental God, did you?
yeah, and I was taught fear the Lord and those kinds of things. And that didn't make sense to me because even as a child, I thought, wait a minute, if God is supposed to be my heavenly father, my father didn't treat me like that and wasn't judgmental of me. So why would a loving God think that about me? It was a tough thing. So I started looking as I got older, kind of over the fence at different aspects of spirituality. I found some books in our small town local library on Native American philosophy and started reading them one by one. And oh my gosh, that made so much more sense to me than what I was being taught.
But then initially, I guess you would have found it difficult though, because I mean you couldn't always enter that arena of the spiritual subjects because I mean, am I right to say your ex-husband was quite abusive and he didn't like you, delving into such things?
Well, my ex-husband was very abusive, but he was spiritual. Spiritual in a different way. He went to lunch one day, in between all the times he was beating me and telling me I was worthless. And he went to lunch one day and came home and said, "Guess what? I'm saved. I've accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, and I'm going to heaven, and you're not." And I thought, well, this makes no sense. I don't hurt people and like that. And why is he going to heaven and I'm not? So I had a hard time with that one as well.
Did you find that you had to love yourself more to get out of that situation as well? Because you had a son at the time, didn't you?
I did. And I think it was the motherly instinct in me to protect our baby that gave me the impetus to escape that marriage and to divorce him, because he began threatening our child. And I thought, boy, I'm not going to let anybody hurt my baby. I don't care what. So that was really what gave me the strength to leave that marriage. It was tough. So Absolutely. I understand what people go through in situations like that. It's kind of a vicious circle. You get sucked into it and they tell you you're worthless and you start to believe it after a while. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that, okay, so this was your first shift into a new paradigm of thinking, was obviously to get away from the abusive relationship. And, you was working for Harley-Davidson, the Harley-Davidson dealership, I believe, at the time?
No, not at the time. That came later. That was much later. And that's a whole interesting aspect of my life as well. It tied me into music and in another way that way, because the dealership that I worked for had an amphitheater where they would put on live concerts. And so I helped out with some of the preparation for that and behind the scenes stuff for that. So that was kind of a different aspect as well.
Okay. So let's move to the point where you found yourself enlightened. I mean, just describe what happened to the audience.
Well, my husband won a trip down to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico on the internet, and he said, we should go down there when Sammy Hagar is going to be playing, because he owns a bar down there, and it says on his website when he's going to be down there. And I had never heard of Sammy before. My husband was a fan, but believe it or not, I had never even heard of him. When he was real popular with Van Halen, I was a single mom at the time, learning the words to Raffi's "There's a Spider on the Wall" instead of Van Halen. So I wasn't real keen on going down there, at the time, because I didn't really know who he was. But my husband talked me into it. It took him a whole year to talk me into it. And since we both love rock and roll music, we went there. And in the middle of one of Sammy's concerts, I was feeling this amazing, tremendous connection to him. I describe it in the book as it felt like he was really familiar to me. And I remember thinking, this is ridiculous, because I'd never heard of him before. Why would I feel a connection to someone I'd never heard of? And I describe it as a band of liquid golden light that flowed back and forth between Sammy and me. And before I knew it, the words to the song that he was singing suddenly became tangible objects, and I could actually see the words he was singing. And they started to lift me right up out of my body. And I thought, well, maybe the heat's getting to me in here. It was probably 150 degrees in the room, when people pressed in body to body. And so I thought maybe that was what was going on. But I also at the same time felt a very deep reassurance and love and a comfort that, don't worry, everything's going to be okay. And I felt myself going higher and higher with the words Sammy was singing and through the roof of the building. And I remember looking down at my body, and I could see myself in the crowd rocking out to the music. And I thought, how can I be me up here and me down there at the same time? Doesn't make any sense. And I heard myself say, oh my God, because it was just so incredible. I felt filled with this bliss, this joy, this amazing love that was just all encompassing. And before I knew it, I was in another dimension, is all I can call it, or another place or another realm of consciousness. And I felt God's presence there. And God was not a race or a gender or a religion, but all of these things and none of these things at the same time. And God flowed through me and I flowed through God, and we were one. And I understood at that moment that the only thing that matters is love. And I was overflowing with love, filled with it, overflowing. And I saw, like a movie at my feet, I saw beings and other worlds that we can't even imagine are out there, and how all of those things and on our planet as well, and as well as God and me, we were all connected. It was all one thing. Every drop of rain, every snowflake, every grain of sand, every rock, and everything, God and me and all these other beings as well, was all one thing. And it was so wonderful and so tremendous that I just thought I never wanted to leave that place because it was so magnificent. And I saw my soul, and I saw that my life had a purpose. And I knew in that moment what it was and what I had to do to achieve what I was meant to do with my life. So this experience lasted probably seconds, I'd say. And then I was, boom, like back in my body. And I describe it as turning the volume up on the stereo until it's booming. Because when I left my body, my physical senses seemed to be left behind as well. All my physical senses just dropped away as if they weren't even needed. And so they came back when I went back into my body, and I was still filled with this joy. And I looked down at my hands and they were glowing, and I felt like I was like 10 feet above the ground still. And I looked around at all the people next to me in the show, and I thought, half expected somebody to tap me on the shoulder and say, are you okay? As if I had just passed out or something, but no one noticed any difference. And after that moment, my husband during the concert was in a different area of the room, and because he likes to find the perfect place to take pictures. So he was over there taking pictures. And after the show, when we got together again, I tried to tell him that something really strange and unusual and wonderful had happened to me. And he said, no more tequila for you. We better get you outside.
Well, I mean, so how long did this experience last for? And how long were you in this other dimension or other place?
I think just seconds, really. And yes, I did have a couple of margaritas that night, two to be exact, over a period of about 4 or 5 hours. So I know it wasn't the tequila.
No. Well, did you think you was losing your mind a bit at the time, or?
Yes.
Yeah. And when you went, okay, so you felt that it wasn't a long time in this other place. It was a very quick experience. But you say you got to see other worlds. I mean, what did you get to see in a sense? What did it look like?
It was universes and beings, and just millions of them. Hard to even describe. Just worlds and landscapes that were very foreign to me, and people speaking languages and that I'd never heard before, that I'm not even sure there's even words in English to describe what it was. But I think more than what I saw was the feeling that I got.
Yeah.
And, I've since learned that emotions play such a major role in things like this. And the feeling that I got was, don't worry, love is what matters, and, it's all good.
So love is all that matters on this level as well?
Yes, on any level.
On any level, yeah. Unconditional?
Yes. And it's everything. Like the Beatles said, all you need is love.
All you need is love, yeah.
Boy, they had it right on with that.
So, and these other beings, I mean, did they materialize? Did you get to see their face? Did you get to interact? Or was it just you knew that there was other presence there apart from what you would call the source?
I didn't interact with any of them. I just saw them, as I described it, like a movie, maybe at my feet, almost as if I was soaring and floating, and it was like a movie. Like I was looking down at my feet and I saw all these things below me. Hard to describe, like how do you have a movie playing at your feet? But that's kind of what it was like. And they were not really close up to me. They were farther, and almost like if you took a movie and fast forward it, and kind of went real fast, and because there were just millions of them, and
wow.
In such odd shapes and sizes and languages and landscapes, and yeah.
Did your fear of death just diminish at that moment?
It didn't at that moment, but recently I just returned from a 6-day workshop at the Monroe Institute in Virginia here in the United States. And they specialize in out-of-body experiences and altered states of consciousness as well. And I figured they would be a great next step for me after having gone through what I experienced already to help me sort it out. And boy, they sure did. And after what I've experienced, combined with my out-of-body experience during Sammy's show and at the Monroe Institute, I have no doubt in my mind that our existence does not end with death. We go on and on, and I was writing today about how, we think we're so alone sometimes, but we're not. When we're born, there's people there to welcome us into the world. And when we die, it's the same. There are people on the other side waiting to welcome us into our next dimension as well. And I learned all this a couple weeks ago, cemented my belief in that, and it's such an amazing experience to know that.
Okay, well, we're going to take a short break there, Patricia, but after the break, the phone lines will be open for you to speak to Patricia Walker or share your opinion. Now, you can call us on 0292 000 3666 or text your comments and questions to 07728 758 759. International listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding The More Show Live, or you may choose to interact with us on Facebook and Twitter.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The More Show.
Welcome back. I'm currently joined by Patricia Walker, whose spiritual journey began at a rock concert in Mexico. Patricia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Why, Patricia, do you think you had this experience?
I think that my spirit was ready. I think that the music played a big role in it. The sound, the beats. There's a lot of people talking about how Stonehenge may have been used to incite mystical experiences as well. because of the acoustics and the sound vibrations. I think that was a very big part of it. And I think Sammy was involved as well because he's a very spiritual person himself. And as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I had a very famous psychic tell me that he and I had shared past lives together. So when I started exploring what could have happened to me after I had the experience, I kind of touched on that notion myself because it just didn't seem to make any sense to me why I would have something so amazing happen to me out of the blue like that. So I started doing research about it, and because it changed my entire life. I started getting psychic abilities I never had before. I started seeing visions of past lives and hearing voices, and things were happening to me that I just couldn't explain. So as you also mentioned, I wondered if I was losing my mind or if I was imagining things. So I started doing research into trying to understand what could be going on. And I would checking out books from the library and buying books online and going to lectures and that sort of thing to hear people talk about things like this. And that was how I came upon Sonia Choquette, the psychic that told me that. So.
Okay, and how did you initially make contact then with Sammy? I mean, you obviously left the club that night. I mean, what was the initial contact, and how did that start? And what was his reaction?
Well, yeah, since that night, my whole life changed. I was filled with so much joy and enthusiasm, and I lost 30 pounds without even trying, which I needed to lose, by the way. And amazing things were happening to me. And being a writing type person, I just couldn't stop writing about it. I'm trying, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. So I wrote a poem about my experience and a letter to Sammy, because something was telling me, you need to tell Sammy what happened to you. And I don't know where this voice was coming from, but it was very, very insistent. So I sent the letter and the poem to Sammy telling him what happened to me, never expecting that he would even see it. And if he did, he probably wouldn't read it. And a short while later, I got a handwritten letter back from him saying that he was honored to have been a part of my experience, and he wanted to share my poem with his fans on his website. And I was pretty floored by that because big rock stars don't normally write letters to their fans, but here it was handwritten. And since that time, over the years, he has gotten more and more involved with my book and the progress, and we exchanged emails and letters, and my husband and I started going to more of his concerts and buying his CDs and that sort of thing, and becoming more familiar with what his music was about and what his philosophies were. And because of that, we went to the grand opening of his bar, the Cabo Wabo in South Lake Tahoe. And that was where I actually met him for the first time. And I literally ran into him. I was not looking where I was going, and I literally bounced off his chest as he was coming out of another area. And
so did he get it when you told him? Basically, did he? How did he receive it? Yeah.
He was very supportive. He claims, and I didn't know this at the time, obviously, because I didn't know anything about him, but I later found out that when he was in his early 20s, he said that he had been abducted by aliens on more than one occasion, and that changed his entire life. And so all of this I was trying to sift through all of these things that were happening, and what did that have to do with maybe why I had this experience during his concert as well? So when I told him about all these things, he was very receptive, and he recommended some books for me to read to help me understand maybe what was going on. One of them was Aliens Among Us by Ruth Montgomery, and another was Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. And so every time I would see him, he would encourage me, keep writing. I told him I was thinking about writing a book about this because there were so many things that were happening to me that I just didn't know how to deal with and describe, but they were so magnificent and wonderful and positive that I wanted to share my story. And so he would encourage me all the time, keep writing, yes, write a book. And he started telling his audiences about me and the fact that I was writing this book. And he ended up writing an endorsement for the book as well. And had his son, had his son do the cover artwork for the book. Aaron Hagar is a professional artist, and Sammy commissioned Aaron to do the cover artwork for my book as well. So, and he sells my book down in Cabo at his Cabo Wabo in Mexico. So he was just really, really supportive in so many ways. And he even wrote a song about what happened. And it's really an interesting song about your guide on your shoulder and opening up your mind and your heart to things. And it was just a beautiful song. What a great thing.
Absolutely. It's so your relationship just grew and grew with him,
Yes.
and even to present day, you still have a strong relationship with him. Past the book coming out as well.
Yes. He's been very supportive of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's publicly come out, hasn't he, to sort of state his belief in paranormal activity as well.
Oh yes, many times, and of course, as you can imagine, he's gotten lots of ridicule for it, but he still maintains that, hey, that's what happened. You don't have to believe me, but that's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back into, I mean, what you also speak about in your work as well, that that there's no such thing as time.
Right.
Okay, so just elaborate on that a bit for us, Patricia.
That was one of the things that I noticed when I left my body that time. Time just stopped. Everything just ceased to be, except for the now, where I was in the moment, interacting with my soul and my spiritual beliefs. And all of the beliefs and questions that I'd had all my life were suddenly answered in that moment. And time, like a lot of other things, are just an illusion. Even, sometimes we even have to be careful. We shouldn't always believe what we think about things, because sometimes that can deceive us as well. Our thoughts can sometimes deceive us. So there's just that purity of being, and that we need to embrace, that is just so powerful. And letting go of things we may have held on to all of our lives, because perhaps that's what our ancestors believed in, or our neighbors believe in, or somebody told us that this is what we're supposed to believe in. And that may not be true for you or me, or, it might work for someone else, but may not apply to us. So I think it's really important to question all these things, because what works for one person may not work for another. And that's my view on religion as well. I think that's great. If it works for you, wonderful. But I found that it was just not answering my questions. And, I was always taught, I always believed in God, and now I don't have to believe in God anymore. I know that God exists. I don't have to believe it. I know it on a very personal level. So it's a tremendous feeling.
How would you sum up God then? I mean, was it just the everything?
Yes. Love, pure love, connectedness between all of us, and the one. You hear that stated so many times, the one thing, and that is God. and pure love, and where we're all connected to each other, and everything that's out there, just pure love and no judgment.
But God is just a word. I mean, if you spell it backwards, it says dog. Yeah, so
right?
I mean, you could personify the word for the universe. I mean, I know some people can't do that because it's got to be God. But I mean, it's
right.
It's neither male or female. From what you're suggesting here, it is just the everything.
Yes.
But conscious as well. Conscious.
Oh yes. And making choices, and we are part of that. It's not a separate thing from us. And God, you don't even have to call it God. That's just what I call the everything. The most, the thing is God. Not everybody believes in God, and not everybody believes has the same image of what God is. And that's perfectly fine too. It's what you need, and it's the answer. It's the answer to what our lives are all about and what we're here for. And we are all part of that consciousness that's God, and God is all part of us. It's like this God is the hub, and we are like the spokes on the wheel, but it's all connected, and one part cannot operate without the rest.
So everything is one, and this energy was non-judgmental. I'll just state that's what you're saying. It was non-judgmental. Yes. It was just love. So no matter what deed you had done or committed, I guess you judge yourself in a sense. Then if it wasn't judging,
right, and that was one thing that I had a hard time with my religious upbringing. Is I was taught that, boy, if you mess up, you're going to hell, and if you don't do this or that, you're going to be judged and you're going to be punished for it. And what I saw in God that when I left my body was that is not the case at all. You are loved unconditionally. We all have choices. We all make choices and we make mistakes.
Yeah.
But that's how we learn. There's no sense in punishing us for mistakes that we make, or maybe they're not even mistakes. Maybe they're just what we chose to do at the time, and we had to learn a certain lesson from that choice that we made. And
well, that's interesting actually, the lessons, because when that psychic told you had a past life with the guitarist Sammy, what was the reason for bringing you both together again in that moment?
That's what I'm still trying to figure out. I wonder if it could be perhaps to tell this story with the book. I mean, that's a very strong possibility, since he has played such a major role in the book as well as helping me promote it, to help people. I think my whole purpose for writing the book, and I believe this is Sammy's reason for being a part of it as well, was he's famous, so he can reach a lot more people, with his name and everything. And the whole purpose for writing this book was I wanted to show people that they need to believe in themselves, because this was my story of how I learned to believe in myself. And I want to give people something tangible that they can take and take into their lives to help empower them to enhance their lives and to empower them to take control of their lives. Because, it's all about choice and believing in yourself. And if something so magnificent can happen to someone like me, just an ordinary person in the middle of a rock concert, because of all the things that happened to me, the supernatural things and Sammy's involvement, my dream has come true to be a writer. I've always wanted to be a writer.
Well done.
And yes, thank you. And because of all these experiences, my dream has come true. So I want to inspire other people. Don't give up on your dreams, because if something like this can happen to me, it can happen to anybody. So
and it's that it seems to be that thing where you you're saying, don't give away your power. You are your power to make the change in your life that you need to be now. You don't need to find an outside source to do. Well, it's fine if it works for you, but I'm saying that you can give yourself that power back and say, hey, this is me that's making this change.
Right.
But then is that with the support from from the universal God as well? What do you think?
Oh yes, definitely, because I think as well, things just fell into place for me as I kept taking the next step. I had no idea where I was going. I was blindly taking one step at a time, and things just fell in my lap just effortlessly. And I now know that was an indication that I was on the path of where I'm meant to go with my life, because I didn't have to try to make things happen. And there again, that goes along with the letting go to gain control and to make those choices for yourself. So when it's effortless like that, it was just meant to be.
Okay, well, I want to get more in after the ad break, more into your book as well, and just how you're inspiring people now. And there's some other bits that seem to be just so interesting in your book that I want to cover as well. So stay tuned, and we're going to take a short break now. The phone lines are open for you to speak to Patricia Walker or share your opinion. You can call us on 0292 000 3666, or international listeners outside the UK may Skype the show by adding The More Show Live.
The More Show is in partnership with Ozark Mountain Publishing, taking readers beyond the unexplained.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The More Show is supported by Mindscape, Paranormal and UFO Matrix magazines, available for download on all major digital platforms. Broadcasting from the studios of Radio Cardiff, you're now watching The More Show.
Welcome back to the show. I'm currently joined by Patricia Walker, whose spiritual journey began at a rock concert in Mexico. Patricia, you seem to me to be a much more empowered person now, judging from what I've read in the book about you as well. How do you use this newfound, sort of empowerment in just day-to-day living, for example?
Well, it changes how I react to situations and people, and has really given me a better open mind about how I see the world. And yeah, it's just an incredible amount of control that we have over what we're doing in our lives, and realizing, as I mentioned before, that I have a choice and I don't have to be swept along by circumstances, that I can put a stop to things that maybe aren't so positive in my life just by changing the way I think about things and react to them. And that's a really powerful tool, knowing that. And furthering my journey as well, I'm hoping to get some training to be able to help people so that they can do the same for themselves, because I think that's what it's all about, is helping each other through life. And that's what our purpose for being here is, to help each other along the spiritual journey, and yes, which we are on.
Absolutely. And you would you say you're happier as well?
Oh yes, so much happier. I can't even tell you the difference. It's like night and day. As you probably read in my book, I had kind of a tough beginning in my first marriage, and a lot of low self-esteem, and I'm still working with gaining confidence in myself, but it's coming, because when you go through a lot of being treated that way, and also I think the church teaching that you're born a sinner and you'll always be a sinner, and you can't really escape that. I think that too has a huge effect on us as human beings, that we don't need to feel that way. We are all perfect in our imperfection. So to speak.
Absolutely. Well, it's sort of saying, isn't it, that we're not lovable, but
Right.
I don't feel that way. I'm sure you don't feel that way about yourself. And everyone's entitled to an opinion, and and like you say, if that's the way that they perceive and feel about that works for them, that's fine. Yeah.
Sure. Right.
But obviously, as you've the years have gone on, and this experience has carried on. What sort of other things have you managed to? Would you say, what's the right word here? Channeled. What other information have you been able to channel? Because you say your psychic abilities have sort of grown as well.
Right. Well, I think everybody is psychic. I think we are all born that way, and I think it's like a talent or something. Some people have more of it than others, but we can all learn to cultivate that. I think as children, we have that a lot more, and we're taught that, oh, that's wrong, or that's your imagination, or that's silly, and you shouldn't be delving into that. And so their parents really sometimes discourage that. And but I think we all have that innate ability. And so it's like playing the piano. Sometimes you can play the piano, learn to play the piano, and maybe you can play it okay, but you'll never be a virtuoso, but you can still learn it. And so that's how my abilities have grown as well. I don't feel at this time that I can quite control what's going to come to me. For instance, I would be just vacuuming the living room or something, and all of a sudden I would hear voices and turn around, and there was nobody there and saying things to me. And more I started to see where these things all tied into one another and how they came about. Premonitions of things. For instance, writing my book, I started going back over my journals that I had done years before this experience happened to me. And I actually had an entry in my journal about how during meditation I had seen the very thing that was going to happen to me, but I didn't know what it was at the time. It was just all in symbols. And I didn't realize until when I was doing the book that I went over my journals and I read this, I knew that that was a premonition of what was going to happen to me. So that's kind of the way that things have been growing. And as I mentioned, since I took this course at the Monroe Institute as well, it's helping me to cultivate these things, because it's not, I don't think you can even call it supernatural. It's natural. It's something we all have. And when we tap into that, we can see so much more. Our awareness becomes much more acute of things around us, and by tapping into that, wow, we just have so much more power and ways to approach our lives by paying more attention to that.
Okay, and where has your work gone then? Okay, so you've written the book, which is I've got to say it's an interesting read as well. But where would you see yourself going then?
I'm currently taking more classes and wanting to do events and speaking engagements to show people ways that they can tap into this marvelous thing within themselves. Doing book signings and talking to people. And I'm also doing videos of different aspects of spirituality to give people a more well-rounded approach to different areas of spirituality. So I'm doing that for my website, and kind of right now just in the studying stage, and in between that and making a move to start teaching other people and showing them the way, and working on my next book as well. So that's where I'm going with it.
Excellent. And do you think there's more celebrities out there that are have had these experiences like Sammy?
You mean with a fan like that, or?
Well, experiences in the sense of I suppose he's had the alien, sort of intrigue since a young age, but just the whole hunger for looking at the spirituality and subjects like this.
I think there are a lot of people out there, famous people, musicians that have that, because as a writer myself, I see how a lot of times when I was writing, things would just come to me, and I know they were coming to me from something outside of me that I was connected to, whether you want to call it, again, God or what, my higher self. And I think musicians as well tap into that. And when they're writing and performing, I spoke to a Zen master as well about this, and he told me that musicians are often in a state of consciousness when they're performing where they let down their boundaries. And that was what happened, in his opinion, between Sammy and me, is Sammy let down his boundaries as I did at the same time for this connection to take place. So I really think, and as far as aliens and that sort of thing, I think there are a lot of musicians who will attest to having experiences. I know I read John Lennon talked about it, and Michael Jackson talked about it, and there are a lot of celebrities and musicians that describe situations like that. So I don't think it's a small thing at all. I think there's a lot of people out there that, whether they're saying or not, I think a lot of them don't mind saying because they're already famous.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And do you still find yourself being tested, even though you've grown in a sense, and there's a sort of veil that's been lifted? Do you still find that life tests you?
Oh, definitely. I think that's part of being human. We're tested on a regular basis. If things just always went smoothly and we were never tested to question things, what fun would that be? It can't all be rosy and wonderful all the time, and we're here to learn and to grow, and that's part of what it's all about.
Now, when your parents passed away, was you able to use what you had gained from all the experiences that you had to sort of not put the pain to one side, but to make sense of what had happened?
Not at first. I was so devastated at first because we were so very close. But as time wore on, yes, I began to see the connection to the music through, I have a friend who practices Sufism, and through, I don't know if you have this in the UK, but over here we have hospice, and
That's
through
right.
hospice, do you? Yeah. Through hospice, they were putting on a weekend of writing, music, and crafts to help people deal with their loss. And I met this man who was a Sufi, and he did a drumming segment during one of the days that we had this weekend. And I just, wow, it was tremendous for me. I saw my parents' spirits through the beat of the drums, and I really, really connected with it in a big way. And it showed me that the sound and the beat was such a part of me, and it helped, again, draw me out of my grief, so to speak, and realized that it was time to move on, that I couldn't teach other people joy if I wasn't living it myself, and I needed to bring that back into my life, and that really helped bring me back out and realizing my connection there. And I've since had a lot of wonderful experiences, signs and connections to my parents that have happened to me since they passed on that are just really amazing, and I no longer doubt it. So
Good.
yeah, when you know that for sure, that life doesn't end there, it's a lot easier to handle having such a huge void in your life, because that's what happens when you lose someone that's very dear to you. So you have to know, just knowing that they're still there for you, and you can still communicate with them, and you know, you can still see them sometimes, and they can hear you. So that's just a tremendous, powerful thing right there.
Yeah, but you're never alone.
No, no.
So I also understand as well from your book that there wasn't just the one time that you communicated with God. There was also the time, was it on a mountain?
Yes. Yes, I was having a particularly tough time. I think that was, again, after my parents passed away as well. And I told my husband, I'm going to take a drive up into the mountains. I just need to clear my head. And I drove up into the mountains and near our home here, and I got out at a certain spot and walked up a little ways, and there was something very different about the clouds that day. They were very low, almost like my car had to break through them when I was driving up there, and just something felt very different about the whole day. And I walked up this path, and I thought, well, it's kind of odd that there are no people here on this path, because it's a very touristy place and a lot of people get out and walk up that way. There was no one on the path that day. There was a bighorn sheep that was in the meadow, or a ram, and I was a little afraid at first because I thought he might charge me. I didn't know I was there all by myself, and I don't know, this was a wild animal. But he didn't even seem to mind that I was there. He kind of ignored me. The further I walked, I began to hear a voice, and it said, I am God. And it was coming from the rocks and the path I was walking. It was coming from the ram, from the sky and the clouds, and it was coming from inside of me. I could feel my ribs even vibrating with the sound. And at first I kind of thought, well, maybe this is just my imagination again, but then God started to talk to me, and I decided, well, you know, if it's just my imagination or whatever, you know, what have I got to lose by having a conversation with God? So I sat down on a rock and I started asking God some of the questions that I'd always wanted to know. Like, why did you take both of my parents from me so close together? And you know, what are these things that I was always taught in my religion? Why were these people supposed to be so much more knowledgeable than me, and I wasn't worthy to understand the words of the teachings? And, you know, what did all this mean to me that happened to me with my out-of-body experience? What did it all mean? And God talked to me for quite a long time and told me that the answers were inside of me, and I needed to stop looking outside of myself because the answers are within me. And God also told me, I am always with you. And I said, do you hear my prayers? And God said, always, and I'm always with you. You're never alone. And it was just such an amazing experience that by the time I was through, I just sat there on that rock and I just cried and cried and cried.
Yeah.
And because I knew that it was...
But again, another life-changing experience. Well, I'm sorry to sort of interrupt you. I know we're just getting to the end of the interview, and I just wanted to just make sure that we plug your book and website. So what is your website, and is there a link on there to your book?
My website is bajarockpat.net, and that's BAJAROCKPAT.net. And it's also available online at Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. So, and yes, you can definitely purchase it on my website as well.
Well, Patricia Walker, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, stay tuned, as after the break I'll be joined by former atheist Sandra Sneed, who has been interviewed the source of infinity, that being God. So stay tuned.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.